Putin turns up the heat, firing missiles into Ukraine, and the military leaders left standing in Iran show no signs that they want to stop hostilities, firing at targets in Israel and other Gulf Arab states. So what is going on? Turbulence again, markets down. They don't like that, but we'll get going here. It's Tuesday. Jack Heath, good morning, New Hampshire, but really now, good morning, New England. Good morning, regionally. Good morning, worldwide. Hey, Google. Hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an H. Speaking of the Pulse of an H, our poll question up on X this morning, J-Dog, and you'll have results from yesterday. Are you concerned hostilities between the U.S. and Iran will resume this week after President Trump yesterday said looked like there was a break in the action and possible back channel communications with Witkoff and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, talking with Iranian officials about an agreement, and no signs with the military leaders that are left, whoever they are, whoever's running the country, who's ever running Iran, there's no sign, doesn't look like they want to stop anything. J-Dog, results from yesterday.
Do you support ICE handling security at airports? 75% saying yes, 25% saying no.
Wow, that's interesting. All right, we have a lot going on today. Got a full show for you. Speaking of the economy, the ups and downs, and yesterday was real up. Today's not going that way. But Stephen Junot, the senior economist with Bank of America, one of our tremendous, great backbone sponsors of the program, will be joining us at the bottom of this hour. And he is a really good forecaster of this economy. With the fact, when you factor in what's happening in the world, particularly the Middle East, it's going to be interesting to get his take, because at the end of the year, Stephen was pretty bullish on this year and next year into 2028, believe it or not, with growth in the overall economy, I think at 2.5% or just under 3%. Right now, one would wonder if what's happening in the Middle East, particularly between the United States, Strait of Hormuz, with all the global shipping through there of oil and fertilizer and other things, with the firing of missiles back and forth with Iran, one would wonder if this economy is going to continue to be robust. Stephen Junot, bottom of this hour, it's Bank of America. Also coming up, Dean Spiliotis, Southern New Hampshire University political science professor, will be joining us, talking about some of this messaging. Is it President Donald Trump playing the art of the deal, just trying to say yesterday, hey, we're going to pause, and they want a deal? And was it sort of a mind game? And people within Iran, or whoever's left of whether the Ayatollah's calling the shots. It's interesting, this latest comment from Tehran that they're not giving up until the end, until they win, which is kind of interesting, coming from military leaders, not the new Ayatollah. So who's calling the shots? Dean Spiliotis, Southern New Hampshire University, will weigh in. By the way, the first hour of the show, when I'm in the Capitol in Concord, we are streaming on YouTube at the Pulse of NH. J-Dog on the boards. Before I get much more into some of the other news talk of the day, and we're going to have a great business interview with Mike Cody at the bottom of the 10 o'clock hour on Governor Ayotte's idea or suggestion to use state surplus land to lease to developers who want to build affordable housing. J-Dog, I didn't really catch much on the overnight. I know the Bruins are hosting the Maple Leafs tonight, but basketball, any big developments?
NCAA women's college hoops last night, and looking at it now, I'm trying to see, it was some big upset, by the way. I believe it was Iowa losing to Virginia. So I think that's what that was, because Iowa was expected to be in the mix. That's not going to be the case. The Virginia Cavaliers, who I had for the men going to the Final Four,
did you
will now have a chance. They're in the Sweet 16 for the women, but that was the big development.
Well, at least you got that. Well, you would have gotten that right. Yeah. All right, thank you, J-Dog. We're going to come back to what is really going on, and I got to be totally candid with you on this. I'm getting a little more concerned, and I'm not saying that what we've done with Iran in terms of the Ayatollah, the original, and then the military targets, especially if they were close to anything nuclear. I mean, they're a terrorist, the Islamic State running The powers to be in Tehran are totally, I mean, that was unacceptable. But as this goes on, I had said last week on the show, a prolonged war, a war that goes on, means more things can go wrong. And, yesterday, the president coming out saying that we're going to hold off on his 48-hour ultimatum on major bombing of utility infrastructure sites, that the Iranians have left, halting for 5 days because of back channel communication saying that, that Iran wants a deal. And it seemed to be pretty legit. The president, commander in chief, if he's saying that, it's hard to tell with the media because there is no media left in Tehran. There's no media left for the Iranian people. They've had a blackout of any communications for 2 months now, long before we attacked targets in Iran. So there's no media. We don't even know who's standing. We don't even know really who's running the country. I really don't think we do. So yesterday's news, their 5-day break, the markets went up to at one point almost 1,000 points. I think they ended about 800 up. Price of oil was down. And this morning, the opposite. Markets are back down again because of the mixed messages. So it's hard to tell. The president, a week or so ago, a few weeks ago, I can't believe it's been a few weeks, the day where he had spoken with Vladimir Putin, and then he indicated publicly to media and the president saying that this war is we're closer to the end, ending this than we are continuing it, and markets shot up. The president saying things like, we've destroyed their military, we've destroyed their navy, we've destroyed their military, we've destroyed this and that, and we've destroyed an awful lot. That's not my point. Our military has been precise. The military has been strategic. We have the best pilots. Our naval presence, our bombing, our different classes of F-35s, the B-2 stuff, the different jets. I mean, it's been precise and strategic and surgical. That's not what I'm saying. Amazing to watch this. And I do think they're taking out targets of the world's number one terrorist regime. And look at Iran. They're still firing at Gulf Arab states. I mean, at other Arabic states, they're still firing at. So that's all said and good, but the messaging from the president has been very, no pun intended, all over the map. And you don't have to be a military intelligence expert to say, okay, if we've taken out their navy, we've taken out their missiles, we've taken out their military, why are they still firing at Israel? Why are they still firing at Gulf Arab states? Why are they still firing? Why are they still able to do this? And so I think we're at this delicate point, and these things are not a perfect science. No military conflict ever has been that I'm aware of. Maybe the only one I'm aware of was the one last June when we stealth bombing mission of those two so-called the two targets in the mountains of uranium enrichment that were not, supposedly couldn't penetrate those. And we went in and out. They didn't even know we were doing that. It was an amazing operation, but that was a one-day operation. Venezuela was an amazing military operation going in and getting Maduro and his wife. That was amazing. But this is going on now, and the ramifications are profound because you have Russia and China paying attention, and global stuff going on in the Strait of Hormuz. So this is getting a little convoluted, in my humble opinion, and some commentary here, 603-228-2080. And I don't really know, I don't know if anyone, I mean, this is what you have, the Joint Chiefs, the NSA, the briefings, the President of the United States ultimately is the commander, the civilian commander in chief, and our military. But at some point, it seems that we need a very clear path here of what we're going to do next. Tomorrow's Wednesday, and this is a week where it's supposed to be a 5-day pause. And look, we wake up to news that the Iranian military is not backing down. They're firing at Israel. They're targeting Israel. They're targeting other Gulf Arab states. They're saying they're not ending hostilities. They're in it to win. And of course, they're not going to win. But the point is, they're being defiant. They're not looking like they want an agreement to end things or do a definitive agreement like the president said yesterday. So the messaging is getting a little confusing. And we have to be careful here, in my humble opinion. And these things are costly, and they are costly in many ways. So we'll come back to that with Dean Spiliotis in a moment. And also, I want to talk this hour at some point about Concord, New Hampshire, $17 million shortfall for schools. We talked about that a few weeks ago. So they had a public hearing or a public meeting. And I guess the option is are cuts, education cuts or raise property taxes. I'm going to point this out. Concord already raised and has been raising property taxes steadily, like many New Hampshire communities. I think it's almost $30 per 1,000 for property taxpayers, and I think cuts are inevitable. That's the way you cut when you have a problem. You don't increase property taxes when you've been increasing them and increasing and increasing them, pricing people out of their homes. We've seen this in Dover, where they have a tax cap, and they blew through the tax cap for local education by $1.5 million. And these other towns, at some point, you just need to cut your way out of these deficits. That's how businesses do it, and education is very important. But I don't know how you could not just make the cuts. In some commentary. Also, we're going to come back with Dean Spiliotis and Stephen Janot, Bank of America. Hey Google, hey Alexa, play the Pulse of NH. Back with Dean in a moment.
It's J-Dog.
on the pulse of New Hampshire.
All right, welcome back. We have a couple great experts now. Dean Spiliotis, Southern Hampshire University political science professor, regular contributor, and then John Decker, our own White House correspondent. President yesterday, Dean Spiliotis, let me know when John's on, saying yesterday he's optimistic a deal can be reached with Iran to end this thing, end hostilities and get a definitive agreement. I'm not seeing any signs of that today from Tehran. Are you?
No, I'm not. Good morning, Jack.
Well, is this the art of the deal, or is this a sign that we have bitten off a little more than, obviously people wonder if you've taken out the Navy, taken out the military, taken out the leaders, how are they able to target Israel? How are they able to hit Gulf Arab states? How are they able to be so defined? How do we finish this? And are there some back channel communications going on that are genuine that even the people commenting out of Tehran are not aware of? I don't know who's running the country. Do you?
Yeah, it's not clear at this point. I think a lot of people assume it's probably some of the generals in the Iranian, the Republican Guard. Anybody who spent the weekend like I did following President Trump's messaging on Truth Social, you got to have a little bit of whiplash this morning. I mean, there is some suspicion that the Truth Social post yesterday morning that came up just before the markets opened was well timed to calm things down a bit. A lot of the futures were showing that the markets were going to tumble upon opening. So it had the effect of calming things down a little bit. The market opened up, oil prices stabilized a little bit. And we know President Trump is famous for kind of reacting to his sense of whatever the moment is, rather than kind of a planning longer-term strategy.
But Dean, and I'm not saying, look, I was around when Bill Clinton did a few things in the military, when certain things were happening at the White House, if you know what I mean, or stories. Sometimes presidents will deflect to foreign policy or a conflict to get the minds off bad, poll numbers at home or markets or futures. But isn't that a dangerous game to play?
Sure, absolutely. And I do remember Bill Clinton, I think it was 98, right around the time he was being impeached, a couple of missile attacks directed at Al-Qaeda in East Africa, and everybody accused him of wagging the dog, that famous movie about deflecting the foreign policy. That's certainly possible. I mean, I think President Trump is trying to figure out how to get out of this, essentially. And the problem for him is that for all of the clearly impressive destruction of Iran's traditional military capabilities with Israel and the U.S., Iran is not going to give up its ability to wreak havoc with the oil markets. As long as it can project power in the sense of manipulating global oil markets and energy outcomes, that's really its ace in the hole, and that's the thing that is going to be the challenge for President Trump.
We have a great, maybe we'll get him on tomorrow. Tim Hafner is a retired fighter pilot, lives in Durham, and he's been a military expert for my show. He's been phenomenal. And he said this at the end of last week. He said, when I asked him, can we definitively win and accomplish our objectives with Iran from the air without putting some boots on the ground, which I know is immensely unpopular, makes me nervous, makes everyone nervous here. And he said he's never seen a war that's been won just from the air. He said inevitably you need boots on the ground to verify. And he said the other thing people aren't paying attention to, the Iranian regime studied us, and they are not idiots. Even if they're terrorists, they're not idiots. They know that we have these penetrating, deep bunker busters and incredible Air Force, so they put a lot of stuff deep underground. And he said it's hard to find all that. We've done an amazing job, he said, and he's very supportive of the military. He's a fighter pilot, but he said, at some point you need the Marines, you need the ground forces to go in and verify the uranium's gone, the air defense, the surface to air missiles are gone, and that's what he thinks we're running up against.
Yeah, and the kind of leverage that Iran has with the Gulf of Hormuz and the Strait of Hormuz, and the ability to kind of wreak mischief sufficiently to keep it closed, it's very difficult to kind of bomb that out of them. And the other issue for President Trump is, he's paying attention to what he's hearing from Congress. And so far, Republicans have said, we're behind you on this, Mr. President. However, if you put boots on the ground, that's going to be a different story. So he's got that in the back of his head as well.
And then you get reports like, certain news outlet that, we have Marines on the way, and people read that and they're like,
5,000.
Okay, Marines, they don't At some point, Marines are on the ground, and where are they going to be on the ground? Are they going to that island, Karg? I mean, where are they going? And
Sure, yeah.
I don't know. I think I don't know. This is the stuff where you can sit back, and the fighter pilot has been an expert. His only information now that he's retired is what you and I see, what you and I read,
Right.
and we can be adept and pretty bright at this stuff and read between the lines. And right now it's hard to read. But thank you, Dean. You can listen in. We're going to go to John Decker, our White House correspondent. Dean Spilio at Southern New Hampshire University. Thank you, Dean.
Yep. Thanks, Jack.
All right, John Decker, our own White House correspondent. And John, I was just speaking with Dean, one of our political science experts, on the handling what we're seeing on the war or the hostilities between the United States, Israel, and Iran. And John, yesterday, the president sounded very bullish, very 5-day pause in the big bombings of infrastructure. We can get an agreement done here. And as Dean said this morning, it's like whiplash when you read the news that Iran is targeting Israel. Gulf Arab states, they're defiant. Whatever military leaders are left in Tehran are saying, we're in it till the end. We're going to win. We're not backing off hostilities. So the messaging here is getting confusing, and the markets are showing that this morning, John.
Well, it is getting confusing. And I think that this is maybe a case in which the president tipped his hand a little too much. What I mean by that is, if indeed there were talks that were taking place between U.S. Representatives Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff and individuals in Iran, the president did not need to disclose that. In the same way, I believe, Jack, you look back a few months ago, I have no doubt that the U.S. was talking to Delcy Rodriguez before the U.S. military went into Venezuela and took out Nicolas Maduro. So the president did not tip his hand on that front. If indeed those conversations were happening here, the president did just that. And we see the reaction coming from the current leadership of Iran with the actions that they've taken against the Israelis and also against U.S. interests in the region as well.
Well, the question is, what next? I mean, do we see us holding off this week? Are there some back channel communications going on with Witkoff and Kushner that we're not aware of? Is it a way to smoke out who's really in charge in Tehran or who's left? I mean, where does it go? And then the other thing in the back of my mind and a lot of people's mind, and maybe yours, is it going to take boots on the ground in Iran to ferret out these surface-to-air missiles, underground sites, uranium or not? And how do we move beyond this at some point and look successful in our goals, even if it's not complete regime change, and move on about our business with a safe Strait of Hormuz? Or is that not in the near future? And those are my questions, John.
Yeah, they're good questions, and I don't know the answers to your questions. Obviously the president has spoken very openly about wanting regime change. It's so difficult to get regime change unless you do have boots on the ground. Keep in mind, in Venezuela, yes, there were American forces on the ground in Venezuela for a very limited amount of time, but they were on the ground. And that is a necessary aspect in terms of changing the leadership of a country. Similarly, we see some stories about, Marines being sent to the region, very highly trained special forces being trained, being sent to the region as well. Those individuals could be involved potentially in regime change, or as you just suggested, they could be involved in securing that nuclear material that the U.S. has been seeking.
Thank you, John Decker, our White House correspondent. Hey, I'd love to hear a SEAL Team 6 operator saying we have Tehran, we've taken it over, there's no more hostile military here, or Delta team, but we'll see. All right, we're going to take a break. But Stephen Junot, Bank of America, senior economist, on deck next. He was with us at the end of the year with a pretty upbeat, optimistic economic forecast on the American economy. And now with the Middle East, what are his thoughts? That's coming up next.
News, information.
of New Hampshire. You're listening to Good Morning New Hampshire with Jack Heath on the Pulse of New Hampshire.
Really delighted to have our next guest to take a break from kind of the political military side of the Middle East today and look at the economy. And we had Stephen Junot, who is a senior economist, Bank of America, great partner and sponsor. And Stephen joins us again live this morning here. Good morning, New Hampshire, the Pulse of an Age. Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning.
You very timely interview because you were on with us at the end of the year and right before New Year's, and you were pretty optimistic about the U.S. economy this year. Is anything changed?
Yeah, I mean, obviously downside risk have increased over the last few weeks, just given kind of the rise we've seen in gas prices, the rise we've seen in the increase we've seen in commodity prices, shipping cost, agricultural cost. But overall, I mean, I would say, the fundamental reason why we were optimistic last year, well, those reasons haven't gone away, right? We still are looking at a very resilient consumer. We at B of A, fortunately, get to kind of mine our own data and look at what our consumer card data is showing. And we've seen the rise in gas prices in that data, but what we're seeing is that spending is still very strong. It's running 4% year over year, even when we exclude gas. Then when you think about the tailwinds for this year, well, you still have, expansionary fiscal policy, you still have supportive monetary policy, you still have AI, CapEx and investment, which is just massive. So those tailwinds haven't really faded. So yes, we're seeing kind of more increased risk, but we're still optimistic on growth. We're still expecting the economy to grow faster than it did last year. We're looking at above 2% growth. The labor market's still healthy and stable. There's not a ton of hiring, but it hasn't really shown any signs of material weakening either.
Which is kind of amazing. I guess it speaks to that resiliency. Stephen Junot, Bank of America senior economist, you mentioned higher gas prices. Does that have you a little more concerned for the consumer if they wear on at a higher level?
Definitely. I think for us, it's really, how persistent and how high. So if we get a big spike and then it retraces, that's just a one-off, right? It doesn't really put that much pain. But if you get a period where gas prices are running above $4 per gallon for, the rest of the year, well, that's where you're going to start to eat into kind of some of these tailwinds, right? Think about higher tax refunds this year. Well, if you're paying more for gas, that's where your refund's ultimately going to go. So that's where we get a little bit more concerned about kind of the rate of growth. Maybe we won't end up in, say, that high 2% growth rate that we're looking for this year. We're calling for 2.8%, 2.7% for this year. Maybe we're going to see something closer to, say, a low 2 handle. So it is certainly a risk, something that would slow things down. But we're not concerned that it would really push the economy into a very significant period of weakening because, of course, the U.S. is a net exporter of oil. We do benefit from this on the production side, but it is definitely a tax for consumers.
Interesting. What about a K-shaped economy, Stephen? Is that still how you see things right now? Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so you hear this a lot, and that's, economists, we like to use kind of the alphabet to describe what we're seeing in the data. But the K-shaped economy is basically this period where you have high-income households showing much stronger growth of consumption than low-income households. So it's not that low-income household spending isn't growing, it's just growing more slowly. And we saw this really emerge last year when job growth basically slowed significantly and was running, basically flat year over year. But spending was still remaining very strong. And what we think explained it was basically this positive wealth effect where high-income households, well, they hold a lot more stocks. Right. And we saw great stock market performance last year. So they're spending a little bit more. And we're still seeing that in our data right now, right? Because job growth is still weak. And when we think about gas prices, well, if gas prices remain elevated, that's probably going to exacerbate that K. You're going to see slower spending by lower income households because they're going to have to spend more at the pump. They're going to cut back elsewhere. And obviously higher income households have more of a buffer. They're not as sensitive to rising gas prices. But really what our baseline view for the year is that we're going to see job growth improve over the course of this year. We have a healthy economy. Earnings have been very strong when you look at our companies' reports, financial reports. So eventually we think that leads to better hiring this year. You're seeing some fading uncertainty effects. We'll see better hiring. That's going to support everyone. It lifts kind of everyone up. You'll see that K close a little bit. Those lower income households do a little bit better in that environment.
Interesting. Interesting. You brought up inflation, or maybe referenced it, and it doesn't seem like it's gotten much better. I mean, I still think, Stephen, locally here, we have a very high housing market, not affordable housing, not affordable renting. It just seems the cost of living is still high. Is the Fed getting closer to hitting its 2% target?
Yeah, the short answer is no. I mean, and in fact, if anything, the data is really moving away from them. So we've been surprised somewhat, by how strong the data has been to start the year on inflation. In fact, their preferred measure of inflation is running at 3% rather than 2%, right? They're targeting 2%. And now they've been above 2% for over 5 years now. So they've missed their target for some time.
Yep.
It doesn't seem like we're going to get back there this year. Obviously, gas prices put upward pressure on it. Tariffs have put upward pressure on it. But even when you exclude these special factors, you're still seeing inflation above 2%. So in our view, we think the Fed has more work to do. And what that means, unfortunately, right, for affordability and how that affects kind of U.S. consumers, U.S. households, is it likely means that rates will remain elevated for some time because the Fed can't really cut rates if they haven't accomplished their job on inflation, or they can't cut rates all that much if they haven't accomplished their job on inflation.
Now, speaking of the Fed, we know they just met, held rates for now. That would bolster what you just said. Is that really what we learned from that they haven't met that target and they're probably going to keep things elevated for some time this year?
I think so, unless the situation changes for now. So we admittedly, we are expecting 2 cuts this year. We do think they'll cut a little bit, but not all that much. But I do think where the data has moved to start the year, and what we're hearing from the Fed is that they're tilting a little bit, what we like to call in economics, a little bit more hawkish, which means they're a little bit more concerned about inflation than they are about the labor side of their mandate right now. Last year, they were a little bit more dovish, so they cared a little bit more about the emerging weakness in the labor market. But now I think they're looking at the data and they're saying, well, this economy is holding up well. Inflation is not doing what we want it to do. So we're going to be a little bit more cautious when it comes to further rate cuts moving forward. So we could be setting up for an extended hold. And this is kind of what the market is expecting at this point. They've basically priced out cuts for this year. You've seen rates move higher. And, unless the data kind of changes, I think that's a reasonable kind of expectation.
Interesting. And of course, Stephen Janot, Bank of America senior economist, wealth of information, very good timing. And, really, I think the unknowns are the unknowns, right, Stephen? Because what we don't know is that crystal ball for places like the Strait of Hormuz, global economy, flowing oil or fertilizer through their hostilities in the Middle East. We don't know how much longer this could protract out. And that, despite the resiliency, that is a big unknown that people like even you would be watching to see when we're going to see some signs of moving beyond this, because the market's amazing and how much the market does move beyond things. It always amazes me. The market almost has moved beyond this, sort of calculating the worst has already happened, but yeah, we don't know right now, right?
Exactly. I mean, so we are kind of waiting for more information. We're trying to see how this develops, what's kind of the off ramp, how long could it last? Because as I mentioned earlier, it's not just about the shock, not just about that one off, but if we persist with oil above $100 per barrel, where you're paying, more than $4 per gallon at the pump, if you're seeing gas prices rise, you're seeing food prices rise, you're seeing goods prices rise because shipping costs are up, then it's definitely a situation that could slow the economy more than what we're currently projecting. So it is risk, and you put it very well. I mean, it's just kind of this known. We don't really know how it will end. We don't know when it will end. And all we can do is kind of update our projections the more we learn.
Interesting. Stephen Janot, really, really appreciate it. Senior economist, Bank of America. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Very interesting. We're going to come back and recap that a little bit. Top of the 10 o'clock this morning, Alicia Pressens Anthopoulos, talking about some of these recent polls, the polling that came out. We had Neil Levesque on yesterday before that poll came out from his Institute of Politics, St. Anselm College, on some of these races, including the governor's race, how President Trump is faring in New Hampshire, especially among independents. We're going to hear more. We're going to take a quick break. Hey, Google, hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an H. J-Dog on the board. It's not a bad-looking Tuesday. A little bit of stuff overnight, but really, I think we're going to, this is just Spring is here, but winter's just fighting the last remnants here. We'll come back and update you on the latest out of the Middle East, the latest here at home, the latest here locally in terms of school board budgets, and a whole lot more. Back in a moment.
107.7.
On the Pulse of New Hampshire.
Very interesting interview, I thought, with Stephen Junot at a time when we have questions, maybe more questions than answers right now in the Middle East. And Stephen Junot, senior economist, Bank of America. Just to recap, I'm surprised a little bit, and maybe I shouldn't be, because he's the expert, not me, and they're great partners and sponsors. But the resiliency, even with higher gas and higher energy prices, the resiliency of the consumer in this economy seems to be holding. And he doesn't see really a weakening economy. And that's interesting given where we're at. I mean, we have very high housing cost here, very high lack of affordable housing, very high cost, I think, still of living, high energy costs, and yet they still see growth, which is absolutely amazing, in my humble opinion. Absolutely amazing in this economy that they still see growth. Good hiring. They point out the tax returns will be higher this year with the Big Beautiful Act. The Big Beautiful Bill. You know, the tax stuff continuing. for middle income earners. And by the way, it's some people on the left side of the aisle or far left side like to say, oh, these tax cuts are just for the wealthy. Well, no. Someone who's a blue collar, middle income worker and taxpayer benefit from these tax cuts, as do tipped employees in the hospitality industry, for example. No tax. These are overtime. I mean, this is something that that again. I'm just going to say it because everything gets political, including this stupid partial government shutdown, which Congress is just a total bunch of clowns, if you ask me, on this. But the tax part of this bill, the big beautiful bill, the tax stuff does help most people who work for a living and pay taxes. And some people on the far left don't want to admit that. Bernie Sanders never say it. It does. It helps people that pay taxes and pay the bills of America. So we still see, by the way, and welcome back. Hey, Alexa, hey, Google, worldwide, play the pulse of an age. I don't even know what to say anymore about what I think is just an insane partial government shutdown. And all I see in Congress is finger pointing and gamesmanship. It's just beyond logic at this point. But why should anything with Congress be logical? It's beyond logic. It's just, why you would risk American lives at airports for your politics in Washington while you're getting paid, and the people, screening for security at the airports are not getting paid. This is just beyond stupid. I don't know what else to say. I wish I did. I really do. I'm not being a wise guy on this. I don't even know what else to say. It's beyond trying to explain it. I mean, the Middle East, I can actually meander my way through that and kind of explain maybe what's going on. Our Congress, I can't. And it's just, you can say what you want, and you can say Republicans have blown this up on trying to get a deal to fund just TSA workers. But the point of the matter and the fact of the matter is Chuck Schumer and the Democrats, right about Valentine's Day, that's how long this has been going, mid-February, voted to not fund Homeland Security over their ICE concerns, and they haven't stopped. And part of not doing that is under Homeland Security, TSA agents are employed and paid, and Coast Guard, and they're not getting paid because of the Democrat partial government shutdown. That's a fact, Jack. That's just a fact. You may not like it, but that's a fact. It's just the way it is. I don't know what else to tell you. But the Democrats and Chuck Schumer thinks they're on the side of the winning issue. They think they're right, and they think they can just keep doing this despite the mess, despite the concerns at major airports. They think they're on the winning side of this. And the problem in Washington is one side just wants to win at all possible costs. And I've said this over and over again. If you think members of Congress really care about your health insurance, and that was the genesis of the first government shutdown, if you really think they give a damn about your Affordable Care Act or unaffordable health insurance or COVID era subsidies, which I'm not even talking about right now, if you really think they give a damn about your health insurance, if you really think they care about your Homeland Security at airports, if you really think they care about your Social Security payments, you are smoking something that you probably shouldn't smoke this early in the morning. Or, I don't scam, but I could show you some really good oceanfront property in Columbus, Ohio. In other words, doesn't exist. They don't care. What they care about is holding power and winning in the midterms and winning elections and then getting reelected. And that's what they care about. That's what they care about, is winning elections. And they hide behind these issues like ICE, like health insurance, and then they run their politics and they keep the government shutdown. Do you realize the last government shutdown, and I don't mean to say anything, I think I was the only person pointing this out on a daily basis in regional media on a network of commercial stations. Do you realize through October and into November that the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard workers, civilian, were not getting paid because the government was shut down? Do you realize that? Do you realize that in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Gather Food folks who provide food for people that can't afford to go to Hannaford or Market Basket to buy groceries. They served 10,000 meals during that government shutdown. In Portsmouth, New Hampshire, they served 10,000 meals in October. In Portsmouth, New Hampshire, 10,000 meals for people that could not afford to go to Hannaford or Market Basket to buy a couple $100 of groceries. 10,000 meals in October. It was a record. They've been around like a century. The median home price in Portsmouth is $1 million. But you tell a civilian at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard working on our incredible nuclear submarines, you tell them that that government shutdown was okay and they weren't getting paid. And yet, during that government shutdown and this one, the fat cats in Washington are getting paid. I don't know what to tell you. I really do not know what to tell you anymore on this partial government shutdown. I thought it would be done by now, and it's not. And, you know, this is the third time this year we've screwed over TSA workers. The third time this year they've not been paid because of politics in Congress. Third time this year. And they average about $60,000 a year. 60 grand a year, not getting paid. Member of Congress closer to 200 grand a year. It really is remarkable. Despicable, but remarkable. Some commentary, 603-228-2080. A couple other stories we're keeping track on is it's not just Concord, New Hampshire, but several communities are seeing shortfalls in the school budget. So this isn't unique to Concord. It's not unique to a bunch of New Hampshire communities. And then we have people talking about the rising and soaring property taxes, which they are, by the way. Property taxes are too high. And these communities that are seeing, like Concord, a $17 million shortfall this year in the school budget, they're going to have to make cuts. And they should make cuts because it's the only way to deal with the shortfall. Business owners can't raise taxes. Business owners can raise prices, but business owners have to cut when their business is down, when they're selling fewer product. When a restaurant has fewer people, they might let some people go. You cut costs when you're in business. And these city and town managers, these boards, the city of Concord, they got to realize you cannot keep overtaxing property taxpayers for the education budget, as important as education is, because you're going to price people out of their home. And at some point, you have to do that seesaw cost-benefit analysis. Do I literally price someone out of their home and make them move because I can't cut the school budget? Of course you can cut the school budget. And I'm a father of an educator, a proud father of an educator, and I support and I'm a fan of public education, a product of it. But you got to cut. When you don't have the money, you just got to cut. And then the other thing that's a real problem that I'm not going to get into right now is our national budget. When I talk about the spineless members of Congress sometimes who only care about themselves and winning elections, our national debt is getting closer to $40 trillion, almost 39 something, 40 trillion almost. And Social Security in 5 or 6 years will be insolvent, and no one is talking today about saving it. And how important that is that to you, getting a monthly Social Security check if you're on fixed income? Hey, Google, hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an H. 10 o'clock hour coming up next.